Off this wonderful networking time. It's wonderful to have such vibrant conversations, and I think shows the power of this conference and bringing together so many wonderful people. But we have an excellent panel that we're going to start now on the role of state and federal agencies. We have 4 speakers coming from different parts of the country and representing different positions. And we will start with Alyssa Schuren, who was the commissioner for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation and is now with the Management Center.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with you today, and what a great group of people to pull together. I've really appreciated being able to be here over the last couple days. And this is actually the first time I've ever been introduced by someone who has the same name as me. So thank you, Alyssa. And so as Alyssa said, I'm a partner with the Management Center, which basically means I took my role in government, and now I help other people set up their government agencies for success or their nonprofits. But I worked in government in Vermont as the commissioner for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and also worked as a deputy commissioner there for 4 years. And before that, worked for a couple different nonprofits, but I was with Toxics Action Center for 8 years as their executive director for a portion of those years. And so these issues are very close to me, and I appreciate their role in hosting this conference today. So thank you for having me here. So this picture that you're seeing here, this is a picture of North Bennington. It looks very nice here, and it is very nice, actually. But one issue that is in the town of North Bennington is this is the former ChemFab facility. ChemFab had large chemical baths that they would dip fabrics into, and those fabrics made, like the roof of the Superdome, and also you can see this is Denver International Airport up here. And that the tents, those tent-like structures, have a lot of PFOA in them and have these were made of this type of fabric. I was sitting in my office as the commissioner of the Vermont DEC on February 26th when in walks, actually February 25th, when in walks the director of the Waste Management Prevention Division, and he's red-faced, and he runs in the room, and I'm prepping for testimony I have to deliver in like 15 minutes to a committee in the legislature. And so I'm not really clued in to what is going on with him. He bursts into the room. He says, "We got the test results back." Well, I work for a state agency. We have a lot of sampling and monitoring going on. So to me, I was like, okay, what results? And he said, "Oh, the North Bennington results." And at that moment, I took a deep breath. You sit up a little straighter because I knew what was going on in Hoosick Falls. I knew that a resident had asked, had reached out to their legislators. We have Senator Campion here from North Bennington today, and had asked us to test, which we did. And we had taken 6 samples. We took the municipal water supply, we took a couple samples around the ChemFab facility, some residential, and then we took samples about a mile away at the wastewater treatment facilities and one in between. We thought that wastewater treatment facility sample, the furthest one away, would be our Sentinel well. We thought that would be clean. We thought it would give us a good perimeter. The municipal well came back clean, which was great. That was miles away in like the foothills of this mountain. It was really well protected, and that came back clean, nowhere near this area. But all other 5 samples came back contaminated, at 2,880 parts per trillion, and 20 was the health advisory at the time. They're all very scary. The scariest thing for us, too, was that the wastewater treatment facility well came back. The one way far away also came back contaminated. So we had never experienced something like this at our department. Our staff were wrestling, like, how big an area are we talking about for contamination? And the contamination is so far away from the potential source. And all of that posed a lot of questions. So I decided, okay, well, at this point I still thought I was going to testify for some reason. I head down to the State House, but I knew I was going to stop at the governor's office on the way to break the news to the governor, to make a plan, then go testify in committee and come back to the office. So I go to the State House, the governor's there, he's in a meeting, and I tell his chief of staff, I need to get in, I need to break up the meeting, I need to tell him this is going to be a big deal, and we need to get on it. So they have me wait for like 10 minutes, and then they break up the meeting. I go in, and the governor's there with his staff, and he says, well, what's going on? This is definitely the first time I had broken into a meeting of his, all in a huff like that. It usually didn't happen in my life with him. So I broke the news to him. I laid out a plan of the way I wanted to handle it. We got some of our scientists on the phone from the department to brief him, and he said, okay, let's do it. And then he said, I want to hold a press conference in an hour. We obviously had a lot of work to do before we could do that. We wanted to make sure all the citizens knew that what their results were. We wanted to make sure the legislators had been informed. We wanted to call the town municipal officials. Like, we had a lot to do. So we said, can we do it in an hour and 2 hours? He said, do it in an hour and a half. So we got it all ready. And then an hour and a half later, we were breaking the news to the press. We were breaking the news to the public, and it's a very intense time. We also were letting EPA know. At this point, EPA's level was 400 parts per trillion as an advisory level, or as a short-term, I guess, advisory level at the time. So we were this was that moment. Within 24 hours, we were holding a community meeting down in North Bennington. This was the first community meeting I had ever attended where I showed up an hour early and the room was already packed. I was thinking I would get there an hour early to get on the same page with my team, but people were there, and by the time we actually started speaking, there were so many people in this North Bennington volunteer fire station that they were spilling out, into the hallway and into the street, and it was very cold that night in February in Vermont, and people, were climbing all over each other to try to get into the room. We got in as many as they could, but we literally had to people had to shout out to other people. And it was probably like 15 different media outlets in the room at the time as well, which is a lot for a very small town in Vermont. So we broke the news to folks, and we decided at that, and people had tons of questions, you can imagine, like, how long have we been exposed? How's this going to impact my family? How's this going to impact my children? What's my garden like? What's my, is my well contaminated? And we decided that we were going to set a 1.5 mile radius around the former ChemFab facility and put everyone on bottled water. And we decided that because we had the benefit of Hoosick Falls going first. And we knew what we were, and then we looked at what was going on in New Jersey and some other places, and we knew this was likely big, this was likely widespread, and that people were likely exposed. And so we set a 1.5 mile radius, and this was on like a Friday night at 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night, where we made that declaration. And all weekend long, we were working to bring in, we were working with the National Guard to get the water tanks brought in. We were working with contractors to get bottled water delivered by Monday morning or by Monday afternoon at the latest. We were setting up locations for where that could be dropped off. I don't know if anyone has ever been involved in an emergency response or has been trained in like incident command structure and emergency response, but this was very much like that. We certainly didn't declare it an emergency, but it was operating. We wanted to operate it through that lens because that's a really effective system to operate when you have to respond to something. And so the community meeting that we held on Friday night was also with the health department. And so the health department was a real partner in answering questions. And we worked with the Environmental Protection Agency as well to figure out roles. And I wanted to keep the role, I wanted to stay in the lead at the state. I wanted the EPA to respect that and to allow us to, respond in the way that I had planned out. And they had, they let me do that. So Kurt Spalding at EPA Region 1, we kept in close contact along the way. And EPA decided to let the state lead, but also decided to provide resources if we need to sample in some critical areas, which was great. It was a really good partnership. We kept it in close communication. I understand that's not always how state-federal relationships work. We had a good relationship to start and a lot of trust built up, and I think that helped to pay off here. And our response was very fast, which also helped. This was the structure we put into place in our department. I mean, we had a 211 call line, 24 hours a day. I think what is worth noting here is just we had a lot of different people at a lot of different roles around this response. And this was a short-term structure. We had this in place in a couple months probably in place. And we had the 24-hour call line, because when we started taking samples and getting those back, we were getting results every day. We needed to get out to people. I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of results. We just had to get back to people right away. And our team in Vermont, we have some of the best people like working for the state and the country, I swear to, and I'm a little biased, but the head of my team, I was like, okay, we had the information center that you can see here in the corner, upper right corner. It says information center. We had set up in the community where we were answering questions for folks. And Richard Spies on my team said, well, I want to give out these results door to door. I think we should go give these results door to door. I don't think people are going to be able to take the time to all come down to the center, and I want to stick it in the door with a note. If I want to first off get them, we should go at night. We should see when they're home. We should sit down with them. We should answer their questions. We should try to get as many of them as we can. We should do it through the weekend. And I was like, this all sounds great to me. Let's do that. So we all went, people door to door. We sat down with folks, gave them the results, and the first question that they had is, how are my neighbors doing? It was really amazing. So here are some of the results that we got back. Let's see if I can get this to move. I'm going to try the pointer. Maybe this will make it work. It's frozen. But you are going to love the next slide. Because what the next slide is going to show you, which maybe someone can help me move this along, but I'm going to just tell you what the next slide says, which is you're going to see a big slide that has a 1.5 mile radius and lots of dots on the map. Or maybe we just have to wait it out. I don't know.
I think we're just going to wait it out.
Okay. So the dots will show you what the test results are. And so blue was non-detect. Light green is less than 20 parts per trillion. Orange, 70 to, oh, great. Here you go. No, you got it back. Okay, so the circle is the 1.5 mile radius. The offshoots of the circle, we call them fingers. Our best guess was 1.5 miles. It was pretty close to right. You can see the fingers kind of up at the top and the bottom. There's only a couple areas where we had to expand. So just to reiterate, blue was non-detect. Light green was less than 20 parts per trillion. 20 was our health advisory. Orange was 70 to 1,000 parts per trillion. And red was 1,000. Or higher. And then we were working at this point with the former ChemFab facility, now owned by Saint-Gobain, the likely potential responsible party. And so we're working with that company to pay for the bottled water and to pay for those sampling and to put point of entry treatment systems on the homes, all of which Saint-Gobain did. We also started legal negotiations around identifying the scope of the problem and a potential settlement, which hasn't yet been signed. So those continue. As a regulator, we were also thinking, as a regulatory agency, we were thinking, well, where else is this? And this was new to us. It's an emerging chemical. So we were looking at, all right, we were wrestling with so many different factors. You can see on the slide. We actually looked at all these different industries. Because this was an unregulated chemical, we didn't have we didn't have any records to go off of. So we had to guess. Okay, well maybe it was used in this industry, and this industry, and then we went out and we did sampling in those areas, and we did landfills, and we did wastewater treatment facilities, and we did find it. We found it in Pownell in the public drinking water supply there for Fire District 2, a small 400-person municipal supply. That's a house in Pownell with some of the water bottles on the front, the water jugs on the front porch. We also found it in groundwater around the Air Force Base and around the Fire Academy. We found PFOS there as well. But really, with regard to people being impacted through their drinking water sources, North Bennington, because ChemFab had also been in the neighboring town of Bennington, and North Bennington's a village of Bennington, and then Pownell were the areas where that we found where people's drinking water had been most impacted. So let's talk about the role of government for a minute. We know that government, and this we actually did set up. The lower picture here is the granulated activated carbon unit that we set up for the municipal drinking water system in Pownell, and like record speed in a matter of months that was built, and that was us like drinking the water with the governor on the first day that it was there. We're working to the state is working to put in place a long-term find a new long-term clean water source, but this was a good short-term fix. So government can apply the laws. We can respond when something's wrong. We can, do the sampling. We can look for scientific trends. We can help companies reduce their exposure. We can oversee remediation. We can act. We can be transparent, responsive, accessible. We can do those things. But I want to also talk about the limits of government, because every year laws are passed in states and nationally, and it's more and more and more requirements on government. So many years, budgets are cut in state and federal agencies to actually follow and implement those laws. So you have the laws increasing, you have the budgets decreasing, and you have oftentimes people retiring, and then you're not able to refill their positions. And so it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure if you're expecting more and more with less and less for decades. And so also government is there to implement the laws, but our laws aren't strong enough to be protective. So that also creates a real challenge and leaves some questions on the table. Yeah, I feel great about our response that we did in Vermont. I do. I feel really good about that. I don't think it's enough. And so that leaves questions for many of us. We've been talking about the role of scientists all day yesterday, and so I'm not talking about that, because we've heard a lot about it. And I think the scientists in this room and many others across this country are doing an amazing job asking the right questions and linking their work to communities and getting tangible action as a result of their work. And so I thank you for that. We are doing a lot in these three categories, and we can do even more. So with regard to policymakers, EPA has set the floor on toxic regulations for us, but states can do more and should. We could use a precautionary principle approach in how we do our laws, and some of our laws reflect that now a little, but most don't. And it's a frame that I think we can all benefit from. We can have, consumer campaigns or public interest campaigns that systemically try to change the way we manage chemicals in society. We just recently saw the Toxic Substance Control Act be updated at the federal level, and that's a step forward, but certainly is not far enough. And with EPA's budget proposal right now at a 31% cut, I believe, it's going to be really hard to implement that effectively. As educators, we can advance green chemistry, green engineering, green design. We can teach that and do classes around that and start to embed that in the way that we operate in society. We can also pull together councils of advisors from the legal world and the citizens and the scientists to ask really big questions about how to tackle these problems and to make change in that way. Business can implement a lot of these green chemistry practices and lead and create market share around that by branding themselves as green companies, and a lot of times actually save money through doing that. So, I've listened to folks talk over the last couple of days, and I agree that the laws and regulations we have should protect us. They should protect our families. They should protect us at work, and people deserve that. And we're a long way from that, but I feel confident that at least we have the right people talking about it, and that we're making progress in the right direction. And I encourage you to continue that conversation, and I thank you for the work that you are doing, because we really need it, and we need to succeed, and we know why. And this is why for me. This is my son, who's 6 years old. And he is present with me, always. And I carry him with me when I am out, like working on these issues. And when I was standing in North Bennington this. I get to go home to a healthy child at night, and I'm so lucky to be able to do that. But I feel that when I was in the role of government, I think government officials in these roles, we have a responsibility to act. We were given, it is a privilege to be in a leadership role in government, and I think government officials should own that and recognize that. And I'm very proud to have worked with so many people that did and do. So thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
So we just close this one. Excellent. Thank you so much, Alyssa. We will now have a presentation coming from the state of Michigan. We'll start with Christina Bush, who's worked for 15 years with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in the Toxicology and Response section. And then she'll be joined by Sue Manente, who's a health educator with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and has been working on the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base since 2012.
Thank you very much. I brought up a paper copy just in case we had those IT issues that seem to be plaguing us. And that seems to be the bane of our existence. We rely on this so much. But I'm going to cover more of the issues that we faced and the recommendations that we made, and Sue is going to talk a little bit about the outreach that was carried out. Let's see if this is... No, must be this one. Got it? Good. All right, so I'll just cover the timeline real quick and talk about the issues that we first found in fish, and that you might be thinking I'm doing this big call out about fish. Not really, it was just a typo, and when we changed fonts, that's why it just stayed in caps, and we missed that. Okay, but we will be discussing fish briefly, and then getting into drinking water and what are the exposure concerns that we're considering and that we are hearing about, and who has been involved in this from an agency perspective. So in the timeline, the DEQ, which is the state EPA, the Department of Environmental Quality, heard about the possibility of this PFAS, and maybe you just heard that. I've got the Midwestern accent, so you know I'm saying PFAS when I say PFAS. That they heard about the possibility of this type of contamination at the base. They heard about it at a conference, so they came back, and during their monitoring, they went out to monitoring wells, sampled, sure enough, it was there. So then they worked towards, okay, well, where is the worst of it? And that was in the fire training area, as is typical. From there, and we'll get to a map here real quickly, they are looking for, did I go back? Yes, I did. I'm going to point out on the map real quick certain areas to be looking for here. So some of this was covered by Aaron and Cindy yesterday during their presentations, but what we have here is the base. This here on the right side of the map is Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes, and then this inland lake here is Manente Lake. This squiggly line is the tortuous journey of the lower Au Sable as it goes from an impounded stream upstream and deposits into Lake Huron. This area of the base, right about there, and we'll have a closer view of it in just a second, is where the fire training area is, or was, I should say. Well, I guess it still is. And then just south of it is what we called Clark's Marsh yesterday, that was referred to in Aaron's and Cindy's presentations. So those are areas that I'm going to be referring to in the further discussion. So as I said, the investigation really started at the fire training area because you want to look at the worst area, the likely worst area first. DEQ found that out. They sampled fish and had them analyzed for PFAS. The data were turned over to the State Health Department because we are the ones responsible for the Eat Safe Fish. That's the name of our fish advisory program, the Eat Safe Fish Advice. We looked at that and we used some provisional values because we had not yet put this on our map as far as contaminants that we want to track in fish. It's on the map now. And we determined that the levels of fish were unsafe. Apparently, we probably have the highest contamination of PFAS in fish that's been recorded so far. So that's a dubious distinction, but we were up around 9,000, close to 10,000 part per billion, PFOS in the fish. That is the main one that we were concerned about because of its ability to bioaccumulate. So that's the fish. I'll be coming back to it very briefly. And then as far as the timeline for the water, we identified a type 1 water supply well in a trailer park right next to the base. And to be perfectly honest, because the city water had been extended due to the legacy contamination of the base back in the 90s for the TCE and all the other goodies, we believed that pretty much everybody was on public water. Well, we were quickly dispelled with that myth. So the timeline shows that we moved pretty quickly for state government and federal government on this and got notification out to the community in February 2016 saying, we recommend that you not drink your well water. The city water was fine. It's obtained from Lake Huron, but the well water that was down gradient from Wurtsmith, we had real concerns with them drinking. So moving into the next slide, this shows a little more close area of the Clark's Marsh. These are ponds that were originally beaver ponds. So there were beaver dams holding them in, and sometimes beaver dams flood out. So the Army Corps of Engineers came in and put in engineered dams. So there are water control structures. It keeps the fish in, but not the water. And the water eventually does come out to the Au Sable, and we have found some detections of PFOS in fish in the Au Sable, but not to the extent, certainly not to the extent of what we've seen in Clark's Marsh. We also sampled at fish in the Manente Lake, and similarly not to the extent that we are seeing in Clark's Marsh. So Sue will talk more about the outreach that we've done. Now with these two maps, as I'm moving into drinking water, Erin showed a plume map yesterday, and this is one that is probably one of the more recent maps that our DEQ and their work team have assembled as far as where the contamination is estimated to be based on monitoring well data and drinking water well data. So the Manente Lake does not present a barrier. It is going under the lake, and that is due to various hydrological features. And then Erin pointed out what we call the coal bath neighborhood up here. There was some fires that we believe that foam from the base was brought out to extinguish. And then south of the river, here is the school area, and there were a couple of fires there where foam was brought out. So we're getting detections there. Certainly nothing like what we are seeing on the base and the monitoring wells. Just huge concentrations of total PFAS in the groundwater there, but evidence that it is entering into people's drinking water wells. So the map on the right is showing where the area is where we have recommended that people get onto alternate water with a reverse osmosis system, bottled water, or if it works, to get hooked up to the city water. So we're not including the cold bath area, and I'll talk a little more about the decision matrix for that. Nor are we including the area by the school. It's the area that is down gradient from Wurtsmith, and we are giving the advice to people whether or not they have been sampled, and if they have been sampled, doesn't matter the results. We are recommending it. It's not an enforceable one, but people are taking us up on it. So this is the decision tree that we devised as far as, well, how do we decide what the recommendation is going to be? The blue hashed area pretty much follows this path here. It's down gradient. It seems to be fitting in with what we call the conceptual site model for how the contamination is moving. So we recommend seeking alternate water. In some of those areas we're outside of that blue area, but we haven't bounded where the plume is yet. We are still trying to obtain data for that. And if it does show positives, doesn't matter about the number, if it's showing positive detections of PFAS from Wordsmith, we're saying get an alternate water system. Otherwise, if there are no data available for that well, we're still at the point where we do need the data to make a recommendation. Then we have these other areas, the coal bath area, the area by the school. There's another area further north of the base that's had a fire where foam was brought out to extinguish the fire. So with that, it's a little trickier. We don't have that heavy contamination up gradient. We don't have Wordsmith looming over this area. So what we are doing is we are comparing it to the EPA number. The state of Michigan is in the midst of updating its cleanup numbers, so it is working on drinking water criteria for PFOS and PFOA, not total PFASs. And the numbers are similar, but just like other states, we've got a whole different, every state does something differently, and it's not always in sync with EPA. So there are just decisions that have to be made based on the science from toxicologists, decisions within the Department of Environmental Quality, and then decisions by the legislators. So exposure concerns that we have, I should come back as far as, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip over that, but let me come back to the maps as far as the drinking water area. Whoops, now I've gone too far. In this area, the blue hashed area, that's going to come up real quick here, and probably go zipping by again. So why this area, and regardless of the results, and regardless of whether or not they've been sampled, the rationale that we use, because everybody was saying, well, you're not over the EPA number. Why? Why are you saying that we should not be drinking this water? Well, because of that heavy contamination back at the base. We don't know how long this has been going on. The contamination is not yet controlled, so we don't know how long it's going to continue to go on. We don't know what the levels were previously when these first started entering the wells. We don't know what the levels could be. We actually have that little red dot right there. We were getting PFOS and PFOA concentrations probably in the 10s to 50 part per trillion. That little red dot right up here was a residential well, 3,000 parts per trillion PFOA, right in the middle of nothingness. What is happening with this groundwater plume? We don't understand it completely. We have concerns about the other PFASs that are in this mixture that we don't have a whole lot of toxicological data about. We know that many of these are bioaccumulative and are going to have the half-lives that we're concerned about. So they're going to be in the body long enough where if they're going to do damage, they have that opportunity. And part of the other issues that we have is, I think I said it, well, and it'll come back to me if necessary. So as far as the exposure concerns, where I was on that slide, we have heard about the past exposure. What was going on the base? What about the veterans who served there and the civilian workforce and their families? Like most of these bases, they had on-base housing, and so the whole infrastructure of the water supply system would have served the homes, not just the areas in which the military personnel and the civilian workforce were working. Then off-base exposures, we don't know when they started. So could that be modeled? Maybe. Should there be a health study? Lots of questions. Right now, ATSDR is not directly involved, but they are in conversation with us, and we are trying to facilitate a conversation between ATSDR and the veterans who are concerned about this. And then when we move to the present, well, the base is no longer active. It was deactivated in 93, or closed in 93. So the base is now on city water. And city water, as I mentioned, I believe is from Lake Huron. And we have sampled that. Very low levels. It's typical of what we are seeing in background concentrations. We received a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant from EPA. I'm not quite sure how many years ago it is now, but I think our report on that might have come out in 2011, where we went and sampled surface water throughout the state. And it was more looking at surface water and the effect on fish. But at least we had surface water data. And Lake Huron is a surface water. We did not have data for that from that study. However, with the work with Wordsmith, getting the data from the water authority, getting it from Lake Huron and understanding what that is, we compared it to these other surface water body samples that we took for the GLRI study that I mentioned. And we are seeing that it is very similar to what we would call background. We've got some really what people would consider pristine waters in the state. If you ever get up to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, go check out Tequamanon Falls, Tequamanon River. That was one of the areas that we sampled. Considered pristine, very low levels because of that atmospheric deposition, more than likely, that's going on. So we felt very good about the Hushra water. The off-base exposures, as I mentioned, the one sample, and then there is a sample down by the in the residential area that's across from the school, so that is in the area where foam was brought out and applied at fires near the school, but the plume has migrated off, and we are comparing it to the 70. So there is a sample there. So it's about 250 samples, more to go. We don't know where the edges of the plume are yet. Our concern that we are trying to get across is for drinking and cooking. One thing that comes back to us, and Aaron brought this up, is that this is a tourist town. People come up here to recreate. They want to canoe, they want to go fishing, they want to splash around in Lake Huron or in Van Etten Lake or other lakes around there, go tubing down the Ausable River. People are thinking, oh my gosh, I can't have contact with this. If it's in my well, can I shower with it? Can I bathe with it? We repeatedly have to tell people because it keeps getting asked. So we just make it a point now during our meetings with the community. Direct contact, we do not have a public health concern about based on our understanding of the chemicals. So let me go through with in Lansing, which is our state capital. The governor's office is maintaining a lot of interest in this, and various state agencies. The DMVA is the Michigan Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, and especially since we're getting some more military sites in the state showing up with this type of contamination. Working a lot hand in hand with the district health department. The district health in Michigan, this might be different from other states, but the local health departments are not a part of the state health department. They're fairly autonomous. We do a lot of partnering together. They may rely on us for a lot of expertise that they cannot have at their level, but they are the boots on the ground. We really appreciate our local health department and our district health department partners. Working with the township officials, chamber officials, how is this affecting us economically? Conservation clubs, because this area that I'm talking about, lots of hunting, lots of fishing, so fishing groups, homeowner associations, the people who live along Manente Lake and other associations along there, and then the individual members of the community, the veterans that have worked there. And with the veterans, we've been working with the Facebook group that Cindy talked about yesterday. We've been working with individuals who, just call us and say, well, I have concerns about that. And as I said, vacation rentals, and also dealing with landlords and occupants. How do you work through that dynamic? And I consider the media a partner in this. This is a way to get out information. And I think it was the team from Pennsylvania who were talking about Warminster and the others in Willow Grove yesterday. They talked about how this still is new to people. We have been involved up at Wordsmith since we, the State Health Department, have been involved since 2010. And this is still new to people who live in that town. It's a weekly paper, and I think people there do read the newspaper as opposed to discarding it for online news. And it's amazing that when I hear from people, well, I haven't heard about this before. The other dynamic that I've noticed is when it was fish, when it was just about fish, we hadn't gotten into water yet, there were some concerns. However, the room that we had our community meetings in was about a quarter the size of this one. The room that we are having our community meetings in now is a church fellowship hall. So it holds probably maybe half again or the same size again as this room. So once it's in the drinking water, people really feel affected. And I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sorry about that. So let me turn this over to Sue so she can talk a little bit more about the outreach that we have been doing for this site.
Okay, thanks. Hi. Well, I am here to talk to you about the communication efforts that we've been involved in up at Wordsmith. Sorry, I'm a wanderer when I talk. And I'm not coming to tell you that it's been perfect or this is exactly what you should do. This is modeled after the activities that we are usually involved with at a site. But we have been more involved here most likely than some of our other sites. So as a health educator, I always want to know something about the community that we're working with. And I provided some demographics here for you. First, I want to show you that here's the Lower Peninsula. Chris showed you a map earlier. This one gives you a little better idea of where the former base was. I have to admit I'm cheating here because I'm from the town, lived most of my life about up here, about an hour north, so I'm pretty familiar with this side of the state. It is a lower income side of the state. The economy always struggles up there. It's a little bit of an older population. I should mention that the median household income for Michigan is about $48,000, so you can see that the area does struggle a bit. Most of the population does have at least a high school education or higher. We have a good number of veterans in the area when you look at the population for Oscoda Township. This does not include the veterans and their families that were at the base in the past and have left the area, so we know that number is much greater. Go. Oscoda Township is located on the shore of Lake Huron. If you have never visited the Great Lakes, you should. I don't know what you're waiting for. And Oscoda would love to have you. The main occupations up there are retail, some manufacturing, and some accommodation and food service, so not terribly high-paying positions. This is data from the 2012 census. There we go. And Chris did mention the fishing that's the area is known for. She showed you a map earlier. Again, here's the base, here's Manente Lake. This is the Osable River. This is a shot of the Osable River. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. It's taken from an overlook on the river here. And this is Lake Huron out here. The Osable River is a really well-known trout stream. People come from everywhere to fish that stream, and you can imagine our message was not well received. There's also kayaking events, canoe races that take place on the river, so it is well known for tourist type activity. Lake Huron is known for its walleye fishing and other fishing as well. And then Manente Lake is fished, and it also has some resorts on it that the tourists come up to visit. So when we came along with our message about fish, it had an impact on people's fear for their health and well-being, but also a fear for the economy too. Restart the program. That can't be good. There we go. So the first round was mainly fish advisory information. And so we posted a sign. We really did post a sign. I'd like to post that sign right now. There's two signs. And, oh, we're going to take that out.
Lots of
I guess patience is key here, right? Okay, one more. Post, please. All right, well, you actually saw the sign yesterday in Dr. Birnbaum's presentation. Thank you for promoting that sign, which is this sign. This is the first series of signs that we posted. We worked with the community group to develop these signs, and we had taken some drafts up to the community, and we had a sign that was not quite as stringent looking as this one. And they said, no, people need to understand that this is really important, and it needs to be black and white, and it needs to provide a message. And so this was the sign for Clark's Marsh. I took this picture last month. That's what it looks like now. And then this was the sign that we posted along the Osable River, and it told people not to eat the resident fish from the river, meaning the fish that live in the river year-round, and then that they could eat the fish from Lake Huron. They did not contain PFCs, and also that recreating in the river was fine. Dermal contact